The night my husband turned 40, the air outside our cul-de-sac felt like warm laundry, and the magnolias tossed perfume like confetti. Inside, our kitchen was a small celebration stitched together with real life. A lopsided bourbon chocolate cake on the counter, a paper banner scotch-taped across the doorway, 2 kids vibrating with sugar and pride. We hadn't booked a sitter. Money was tight, and the bathroom leak had started hissing again. But I had ironed a tablecloth, set the good plates, and told myself that enough was still beautiful. I didn't know a sentence spoken at the sink would tilt our whole house on its axis. We live outside Charlotte, where the mailboxes match, and the HOA newsletter shouts with exclamation points. Our 2-story has a porch swing I promised we'd use every evening, and didn't. Because most evenings are homework folders and missing soccer cleats and chicken thawed too late. On Thursday nights, the street smells like charcoal. On Friday mornings, trash cans make a tired parade. It is ordinary, and most days, merciful. My husband rides the light rail uptown to his finance job, the kind of office with glass walls and glowing numbers. He walked in from the train wearing the blue suit that makes his shoulders look broader. The kids launched at his waist, and for a second, all the exhaustion on his face softened. We ate on the good plates. The 7-year-old mangled a joke, and we laughed anyway. The 4-year-old passed the salt like it was a royal jewel. For dessert, the bourbon bloomed at the back of my throat, and I thought, not fancy, not Instagram, but ours. We were having a good night. After the long choreography of bedtime, 2 waters, 3 bathroom trips, 1 scandal about a missing stuffed fox, we stood shoulder to shoulder at the sink, me washing, him drying. The window framed a strip of night and our reflection, domestic and ghostly. He set a plate down and cleared his throat. "Can I ask you something without you reacting?" he said, voice too careful. "Depends on the something," I answered, flicking a bubble from my knuckle. He didn't meet my eyes. "A hall pass," he said, "for my birthday." I laughed, waiting for the punchline. He didn't laugh. He kept talking, words crowding one another, explaining how it would be just once, how it wouldn't mean anything, how guys do it, how it could spice things up, how he loved me and our family and was just... He made a helpless little gesture. Restless. I set the plate down very carefully because my hands had gone cold. "You want permission to sleep with someone who isn't me," I repeated, just to be sure we were speaking the same language. "Just once," he said. "A hall pass. We've been together 10 years. I'm turning 40. The dishwasher hummed like a faraway plane. Somewhere, a clock ticked too loudly, as if the house itself were eavesdropping. "No," I said, "absolutely not." He inhaled like a man stepping into cold water and tried a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I figured," he said. "It couldn't hurt to ask." "It hurts," I answered, shocked by the steadiness of my voice. "The asking hurts." He looked genuinely confused, which was somehow worse than malice. He proposed rules, no emotions, a one-time event, a thing, and I said that asking your wife to co-sign her own humiliation is not honesty, it's cruelty in a nice shirt. We escalated the way these conversations know how to grow teeth. He said I had changed after the kids, that I was always touched out, that intimacy had grown routine. I said routine had a name. Parenthood, and if he wanted more energy in the bed we fell into like corpses, he could pick up a grocery order or start the bath while I packed lunches. He insisted he wasn't trying to blow up our life. He was being transparent. I said transparency would have sounded like, "I'm struggling," not, "Can I sleep with a stranger" as a present. It ended with me crying in the laundry room, perched on a dryer because its fan swallows sound. He leaned in the doorway, hand on the frame, and said he was sorry. That it was a dumb idea, midlife crisis brain, forget it. I didn't say that words, once released, do not evaporate. They stain. In bed, his restlessness transmitted through the mattress like a telegram. At 2 a.m., I stood in a dark kitchen with my palm on the cool granite and tried not to imagine his one time. The faces that rose were familiar. Mom friends at the bus stop, the barista who draws leaves in my foam, my best friend Claire, who had dropped by earlier with the question mark candle and a joke about the old man club. I banished each picture until my jaw ached. In the morning, he apologized again. He did school drop-off, came home with iced coffee, kissed my temple, and swore it had been a joke that landed wrong. An article about keeping things exciting tunneled into his brain. "I'm not that guy," he said, eyes on mine. Believing him was easier than replanning my life, so I said, "Okay." A word that can mean forgiveness or exhaustion, and for a few days we moved around the bruise. He took the kids on bike rides. I purged the hall closet with ferocity and made 3 trips to Goodwill. We returned library books on time. I baked muffins. I let the mundane carry me like a slow river. On his actual birthday, Claire came at 6 p.m. with bakery frosting and a hug that said what only a best friend can say without words. The evening was almost sweet. When she left, I watched her taillight swim down the street and felt steadied by the knowledge that someone knows your kitchen drawers. He stood in the doorway of the kids' room later, looking at their sleeping faces like he wished he could crawl into that innocence. "It was a good day," he said. "It was," I said, and I let myself believe we were past the stupid ask. 2 days later, during naptime quiet, a pending charge appeared on our credit card app. Uptown Marriott. The one with glass elevators that make your stomach dip. My mouth went dry. I told myself it had to be a mistake, a work lunch, a hold. I checked the email we share for bills, typed Marriott, and a clean, friendly confirmation surfaced. One night. King. His name. His personal email. The check-in date. Exactly 2 days after the candles. It had been forwarded to another address. I knew the address the way I know my own. Claire, the subject line glowed, polite and damning. I clicked, and the world narrowed to a thin, bright tunnel. Beneath the reservation lay a thread, each message neat as a marching ant. "You sure?" Her, the night of his birthday, lowercase, a smiley, I knew like handwriting. "Room under my name, same plan." Him. "Okay, what time?" Her, a flurry of logistics, the banal phrases people use to usher themselves toward catastrophe. My body forgot how to body. I had to tell myself to inhale. The dishwasher hummed astonishingly loud. Outside, a leaf blower worried the air. I took my phone to the floor by the pantry, where the kids hide during sardines, and read the messages again, as if repetition could rewrite them into a prank. When the screen dimmed, I tapped it awake with a shaking thumb, desperate for any universe but this one. At 6:40 p.m., he came in with his jacket folded over his arm and his tie already loosened. The kids barreled into him, and I had a feral, shameful flash of wanting to bar his hands from their hair. "Hey," he said carefully, the way he speaks to volatile markets. "What's wrong?" I held up my phone and asked why there was a charge for the Uptown Marriott on Saturday night and why the confirmation had been forwarded to Claire. He is a talker, a man who lives by words. The quiet that felt like a power outage. "It's not," he started, then stopped. "It's not what you think." "What exactly do I think?" I said, steady as a frozen lake. "Because it looks like you asked for permission to cheat, didn't get it, and did it anyway with my best friend." His mouth worked and no language came. "I booked the room to see how it felt. Like a test," he managed at last. And I said, "Do not insult me by calling deception an experiment. Why did you forward it to her?" His face opened and closed like shutters in a storm. He stared at the floor. "We'd been texting," he said. "It was stupid." I was stupid. The air thinned. "Did you sleep with her?" I asked, and the room telescoped down to his answer. He nodded once, as if scarcity could hand me mercy. "Once," he said. It meant nothing. My knees decided to sit before I did. The dishwasher kept humming, loyal and oblivious. From upstairs, the kids called, "Mom, can we have dessert?" I turned my head toward the sound as if underwater. He took a step, palms lifted, the pose of a man who thinks charm can fix fire damage. "Please," he said, "let's talk." "Get out," I answered, surprising myself with the clarity. He blinked. "What?" "Take a bag and go to a hotel, or to hell, I don't care which. But leave this house before I say something I can't unsay in front of our children." He stood a second longer, lips forming and unforming. Then he nodded like a man who has heard a verdict. He went upstairs. Drawers opened and closed. A zipper whispered. The kids thundered down mid-pack and crashed into me, all elbows and sugar hope. "Dessert?" the little one asked, luminous. "2 strawberries each," I said, because rules are rafts. He came down with the duffel, kissed their heads without looking at me, and the door clicked. The house changed shape around the absence. After bedtime, 2 songs, 1 renegotiated consequence, I sat at the kitchen table in the dark and held my own hands, as if they belonged to a woman I needed to comfort. The paper banner still hung at a jaunty angle across the doorway. I thought of the woman who'd stood there 2 nights ago feeling lucky. Somewhere a train sighed, then committed to motion. I opened the notes app and wrote 3 sentences. First, call a lawyer. Second, tell Claire not to come back here. Third, keep the kids' routine steady. I set the phone down and rinsed the 2 remaining strawberries, ate them one after the other, tasted the sour and the sweet, and ground the green caps to pulp in the disposal. Upstairs, his side of the bed was rucked, a ghost of a body. I slid onto my side, watched the blue numbers on the clock until they blurred into nonsense, and did not break. Not yet. Morning behaved as if nothing had happened. The coffee maker burbled. The cat flung herself at the pantry. The kids padded out in footy pajamas, hair like dandelions. I performed a cheerful breakfast, which is a kind of CPR. Oatmeal, missing library book. Please don't lick your bowl like a puppy. In the car, the 7-year-old asked if Dad was still at the hotel the way you ask if a train is still delayed. "He's at Grandma and Grandpa's for a little bit," I said, voice even. "Grown-up stuff to sort out. You're safe, we're okay." He nodded slowly. The little one negotiated 2 bedtime stories. Sometimes truth arrives in small, negotiable portions. Back home, I Googled family lawyer near me, with hands that trembled just enough to make the letters look like strangers. I chose the firm with the simplest website, no gavels, no gold script, and called. The receptionist's voice was a warm cardigan. "We'll explain your options," she promised, and gave me a slot at 2 p.m. Before I could leave for the appointment, the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before the camera woke. Claire stood on the porch in leggings and a college sweatshirt, messy bun high, a Tupperware tucked against her ribs like a shield. We stared at each other through the glass, fogged reflections nose to nose. She mouthed my name. I opened because I couldn't bear for the neighborhood Facebook group to host our ruin. "Please," she said, stumbling into the foyer, citrus detergent trailing her. "Please, let me talk." "Is that cake?" I asked, because sometimes your mouth says anything to keep from screaming. "Brownies," she said, half laugh, half sob. "I didn't know what else to bring." "You could have brought back my life," I said. It came out flat. A fact. We sat at the table where we had once planned baby showers and stained the wood with sangria. She talked fast, fear-driven, as if she could outrun the silence waiting behind confession. He had complained to her about routine, about feeling invisible. She had told him to talk to me until she didn't. He'd said I might be open to loosening rules. She'd laughed until she didn't. The elevator, the room that looked like every room, the moment she almost turned around and didn't. "It was only once," she said. "I knew even then I was burning down the good parts of my life." "You didn't just burn yours," I said. She nodded so hard a pin leapt from her hair. "I know. I am so sorry." The words were a coin rubbed smooth. "Do you want me to say I'm a terrible person?" "No," I said. "I want you to leave and not come back." She flinched, because we had decades of kindness between us like a quilt. "Okay," she whispered, "if that's what you want." "It's what I need." She lifted the Tupperware, then understood, tucked it back under her arm, and went out into the bright, ordinary afternoon. When the door latched, the house exhaled. At 2 p.m., I climbed beige carpet stairs to a third-floor office that smelled like paper and peppermint. The lawyer was my age, neat hair, calm eyes. I gave her the story in paragraphs, unembellished, the way you give symptoms to a nurse. She didn't wince or gasp. She put structure around my chaos. Legal separation, temporary custody, support, discovery. She showed me the math of my life with a pen on a pad. Years married, income disparity, likely orders in our county. "Document everything," she said gently. "Save emails and texts. Keep a log. Keep it factual. Keep the children centered." I wrote document log at the top of a notebook and underlined twice. In the car afterward, I gripped the steering wheel and rested my forehead on it. Not crying, exactly, but absorbing an aftershock. The road I hadn't chosen was real under my feet. That evening, he texted to FaceTime the kids. "Of course," I replied. Their faces bloomed on the screen. Gap tooth and yogurt mustache, thrilled to report that the neighbor's dog had eaten a sock. When they ran to fetch the sock for visual aid, he asked if we could talk later. "Tomorrow," I said. I met with a lawyer. He blinked twice, the only tell I've ever trusted. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." In the quiet that followed, I laced my shoes and ran the loop of our neighborhood, under magnolias and porch lights, lungs burning in a way that felt clean. The swing on our porch creaked when I came home. I sat on it with a glass of water at 8:30 p.m., watched the cul-de-sac exhale its day, and let the truth take its shape. The story had changed tense. I was not in the prologue of a crisis anymore. I was in the first chapter of survival. The morning after Claire left with her Tupperware shield and apologies worn smooth, I drove to the law office with the calm of someone who knows she is walking into a storm, but also knows the map. The sky was rinse Carolina blue, the kind that makes you resent beauty when your life feels like shards. The lawyer's office had beige carpet, framed boats, and the antiseptic scent of professionalism. She spoke in terms I had never thought I would need: discovery, custody, financial disclosures. She outlined spousal support calculations, child support tables, temporary custody schedules. It was like being handed a manual for dismantling my own marriage piece by piece. I nodded, took notes, and underlined document everything in my new notebook until the page nearly tore. When I left, the sunlight was almost indecent, so bright it made me squint through tears I hadn't given myself permission to shed. That evening, he came by with yogurt tubes and avocados, small offerings meant to disguise themselves as care. He asked if he could stay in the car until the kids were ready, voice pitched low, eyes averted from mine. I said he could help with bath instead. The truth was I was exhausted, and the kids needed their father even if I didn't. He looked startled, then grateful, then ashamed for being grateful over something as banal as bath toys and soap. We moved like survivors of an earthquake, navigating aftershocks. He read bedtime stories in that lower register I had once loved. I leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, and listened to the cadence of his voice, soothing, familiar, and no longer mine. Grief creaked in my chest like a door half off its hinges. Later, in the kitchen, he leaned on the counter, palms flat, and whispered, "I'm sorry." His eyes were red, his face collapsed. He said he had booked a therapist, that he needed to know why he'd done this, how he had wandered so far from himself. I didn't applaud. I told him the lawyer had outlined temporary custody and support. He nodded, as though bracing for a wave, said he didn't want to fight me, that he wanted to do right by the kids. "Then do," I said simply. "Show up on time, present, sober. Don't make me choose between protecting them and being fair to you." He nodded, chastened. "Can I see them tomorrow?" 5 to 7, I said. He agreed, and when he left, the porch light threw his shadow long across the grass. Watching him go was a gesture I thought I'd gotten used to, commutes, dinners, the gym. But now, leaving had become a rupture, not routine. By week's end, we had a rhythm I wouldn't have chosen but could endure. He took them for ice cream, returned them, sugared and sticky. I met the lawyer again and signed papers, with a shaking hand. I labeled the kids' overnight bags, with Dad's, in thick black marker. I began a spreadsheet because numbers steadied me. On Friday morning, I drove them to school and afterward pulled into the church lot down the road. I cried into my steering wheel until the horn honked under my forehead. Then I wiped my face and made a grocery list because the pantry was empty and life refused to pause. I started saying yes to help. Mom friends texted with carpool offers. My father promised to take the kids Saturday so I could breathe. My mother brushed my hair on her couch while reading Little Women until the words blurred. Their steadiness was a raft when my chest felt like open water. One night, my father gripped my shoulders and said, "You don't have to be brave every hour." Just the next one, I carried that sentence like a talisman into the long evenings when the house rearranged itself around absence. The first mediation was held in a conference room with bad art and a box of tissues no one wanted to touch. We were polite because the children sat invisibly between us. We carved custody into alternating weekends and Wednesdays for dinner. We negotiated holidays with the brittle courtesy of diplomats. I answered in quiet tones, exhaustion mirrored in his voice. By the end, we looked like travelers in opposite directions, hollowed, polite, emptied. At home, the kids adjusted with blunt resilience. They drew 2 kitchens in their crayon pictures, called one house home and the other Dad's. The little one asked if I'd get a dad house too. I smiled and said, "We're good here for now." Life became scaffolding. Morning runs, work hours, snacks, bath, bedtime stories. On days without the kids, I worked in coffee shops until my laptop died, or walked the greenway just to see water move. Therapy became my Thursday ritual, where I unpacked guilt, anger, and the shameful threads of relief. My therapist said, "You don't have to be a saint to be a good mother." I wrote it on a sticky note and pinned it above my desk. There were setbacks, nights of losing patience, mornings of scrolling his profile against my better judgment, tears in parking lots. Healing wasn't linear. It was a spiral that sometimes circled back to the same view but higher. But there were also small victories. An afternoon when I forgot to think of the hotel. A morning when I laughed with my son over milk shooting from his nose instead of noticing the empty chair. An email doubling my retainer. The first night I sat on the porch swing and felt peace instead of just fatigue. By spring, I booked a weekend trip to Asheville for just me and the kids. We hiked to waterfalls, ate pancakes bigger than their heads, built a blanket fort in the hotel room. That night, watching them sleep under it, I realized I wasn't waiting for my old life to return. I was living a new one. Driving home, my youngest asked if that meant we were better now. I said, "We're getting better. That's different." He nodded, solemn, then asked for pancakes for dinner. It was the best question I'd ever heard. By summer, the ache had dulled into something less sharp, a bruise rather than a blade. The kids and I had a rhythm. School, work, handoffs with their dad, small rituals like pancakes on Sundays and library trips on Thursdays. On my nights without them, I joined a yoga class at the community center. At first, my body shook through every pose, my mind still a hive of hurt. But by the third week, I could hold tree pose without wobbling. Standing there, arms lifted, eyes fixed on a point, I felt a flicker of balance return. Not just in my body, but in my life. I began a list of small things I'd always postponed. Repaint the living room, plant tomatoes, take the kids camping, hear live music again. One by one, I checked them off. The walls went a calm gray. Tomatoes flourished in a corner of the yard. The kids roasted marshmallows under the stars at a state park. On a kid-free Saturday, I went to a blues club with 2 women from yoga class, felt bass rattle my ribs, and laughed until my cheeks ached. For the first time, joy wasn't something I borrowed. It belonged to me. Work grew, too. What had once been a patchwork of freelance gigs began to feel like a career. Clients came through word of mouth and parenting sites. I wrote copy for a nonprofit, content for a tech startup, an article about resilience for a magazine. The invoices were larger now, the gaps between them smaller. At a school event, someone asked what I did, and I said, "I'm a writer," waiting for them to look surprised. They didn't. That quiet acceptance gave me more legitimacy than any paycheck. Even co-parenting settled into something survivable. He showed up most days on time. The kids began talking about Dad's house without hesitation, as if it had always been part of their map. We exchanged texts, school papers, soccer schedules, forgotten sneakers. Sometimes he thanked me quietly when I sent extras. It wasn't forgiveness. It was functionality. And sometimes that was enough. By autumn, the leaves blazed red and gold along the greenway, and I realized I'd gone whole days without replaying the hotel room in my mind. Instead, I was planning a weekend at the coast, negotiating a bigger contract, padding an emergency fund until it had 3 months' expenses. I bought a second-hand bike, rode alongside the kids on Sunday afternoons. We discovered a bakery that offered kids' baking classes, and every Thursday they came home flour-dusted and proud. One evening, sitting on the porch swing, I opened my laptop and filled out an application for a writing fellowship in New York. Once I'd believed fellowships were for real writers, not mothers scraping stories together between lunch boxes and bedtime. But I attached clips, hit send, and sat in the twilight with my heart hammering. The house was still small. The swing still creaked, but the air felt different. Not waiting, not empty, but spacious. The email came on a rainy Tuesday while I was wiping peanut butter off the fridge. Subject line, "Congratulations, Fellowship Award." I opened it, sat down on the kitchen floor, sponge still dripping in my hand, and cried into my sleeve. It wasn't just a line for my resume. It was recognition. A voice outside my small circle saying, "We see you. We believe you." The logistics were a puzzle, but solvable. My parents offered help with the kids. Their dad agreed to extended custody. Grandma pressed a $20 bill into my palm at the train station, saying, "For something sweet, just for you." In New York, November smelled like roasted chestnuts and rain. The fellowship gave me a desk in a loft with high windows and a radiator that hissed like a beast. Writers hunched over laptops all around me. The first morning, I sat down and wrote, Chapter 1, How You Lose a Marriage and Find a Life. By the end of the month, I had 50 pages. When I came home, the kids met me at the station with a cardboard sign in glitter glue that said, "Welcome home, Mom." My oldest whispered, "Did you write your book?" And I said, "I started." His grin was all the reward I needed. Work grew from there. The fellowship led to new clients, speaking gigs, even a small teaching role. My income surpassed what I'd once shared with my husband. For the first time in years, I wasn't just paying bills. I was saving. One night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch swing with my tea and flipped through those first 50 pages. The manuscript wasn't finished, but it was real. It had a shape. Not a revenge story, but a survival one. My survival. Our survival. I thought of the woman who once sat here numb with betrayal, making lists to survive. I wanted to tell her, hold on. You get better. 2 full years passed before I realized I no longer measured my life in terms of before and after. The night he asked for a hall pass still existed, but it had shrunk to a landmark in the distance, visible but no longer dictating my path. The children had grown taller, legs stretched like saplings, voices deeper. They no longer asked when we would be a family again. Instead, they told me about science projects and soccer goals and inside jokes from their dad's house. They still called my place home without hesitation, curling into my bed on Saturday mornings with crumbly toast and cold toes. That word, home, became my anchor. Work had become more than income. It was identity, purpose, a doorway. The fellowship led to a book deal. The book led to speaking invitations. I stood at podiums in conference centers and community halls, telling rooms full of strangers, you are not the villain in someone else's story. I watched women in the third row press hands to their mouths, tears pooling, and thought, I know you. I was you. It was no longer just my story. It was a bridge. At home, the porch swing turned into ritual. After dinner, the kids would finish homework at the kitchen table while I sipped tea, rocking gently. The air heavy with magnolia in spring or sharp with wood smoke in winter. Grandma still visited often, folding laundry, telling me stories about surviving hard seasons. She'd pat my knee and say, "Seatbelt out of habit," our shorthand for safety, for steady, for you're buckled in, you're okay. The divorce papers arrived without ceremony. Just an envelope dropped in the mailbox beside junk coupons and electric bills. We had signed them quietly in a coffee shop, our final act of civility. He apologized once more, this time without excuses, and I listened, not because I needed to, but because it was his work to do. We spoke about the kids, about custody, about how to split holidays. We didn't speak about the past. That silence was its own kind of closure. The night the decree was final, I made pancakes for dinner because my youngest had once asked for it in Asheville, and promises matter. After dishes were stacked and crayons scattered across the table from homework, I sat on the porch swing with my laptop. I opened a blank document and typed, "This is not a story about loss. This is a story about building." The words felt solid beneath my fingers, a foundation instead of rubble. The kids came out with their ice cream bowls, climbed into my lap, warm and sticky. "Are you done with your book?" my youngest asked. "I'm done with the first one," I said. "Maybe I'll write another." My oldest tilted his head. "What will it be about?" I smiled into the Carolina dusk. "About what happens after you think the story is over." They leaned against me. The swing creaked, and the sky glowed pink over the cul-de-sac. For the first time in years, I felt not just alive, but whole. Betrayal had gutted me, but it had not ended me. It had forced me to rebuild, and in rebuilding, I found a self I might never have met otherwise. So here I am, still rocking on the swing I swore we'd use every night, finally keeping that promise. Life didn't turn out the way I planned. It turned out different, and maybe, in its own strange way, better. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If this story touched you, please like, share, subscribe, and comment so I can continue bringing more life stories your way. Thank you for listening, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts.